This episode of New Politics was released on the 28th of February, 2026, and produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal people.
There's a certain kind of politics that appears after war and destruction, and it's almost like there's no rules that apply at all. We saw it after the invasion of Iraq in 2003, where a country was virtually destroyed and taken over by America and other Western interests, and we're seeing it again in Palestine with the creation of the Board of Peace, and that's an initiative created by Donald Trump, and for the associates of Donald Trump. But this Board of Peace is the opposite of peace. It's essentially the reward for the destruction of Gaza. It's part of Israel's plan to remove all Palestinians out of the region. It's a real estate project that will end up being residential and business zones for Israeli citizens, and it's all going ahead against the wishes of the international community. So today we're looking at Donald Trump's Board of Peace and how it's all about selling out the people of Palestine and rewarding war crimes.
According to President Trump's much celebrated ceasefire, the war here in Gaza is supposed to be over and reconstruction underway. But when you're here, it's clearly not the case. There's no bulldozers here. Nobody's clearing the debris. It just looks like this everywhere you go.
So we all know that Gaza's been subjected to extraordinary destruction since October 2023, and this is on top of it being known as an open-air concentration camp instigated by the State of Israel for many decades. But most of its infrastructure is gone, homes have been destroyed, there's hardly any schools or hospital facilities left, and this is the biggest humanitarian crisis that we've seen in a long, long time. And if we put aside the facts about who's created all of the destruction, as hard as that might be, well, it's obvious that Gaza needs reconstruction. It's absolutely necessary and it's absolutely urgent. But normally in these situations, there'd have to be some accountability for who's caused all of the destruction, and that's Israel in this case. And you'd assume that there'd be local representation for this reconstruction, and that, of course, is the Palestinians. And you'd also expect a level of self-determination, and you'd also expect to apply international law. But none of this is happening at the moment. There's no external oversight of this Board of Peace. There's virtually no accountability. And you can be guaranteed that all of the contracts for reconstruction will either go to Israeli construction companies or those companies approved by Donald Trump. Now, this whole reconstruction process has been pushed by the Board of Peace as something that's been done as a good-hearted approach or for the benevolence of the people of Palestine. But destroying Gaza so it can be reconstructed for the people of Gaza, well, it just doesn't make any sense at all, considering that the State of Israel has been doing its best to remove Palestinian people and will never, ever agree to a state of Palestine at all. So it's pretty obvious to see what's going on here.
Those in favor of the draft resolution.
The US plan for Gaza has been approved by the UN Security Council. The vote endorses US President Donald Trump's peace plan, also known as the 20-point ceasefire plan. The plan proposes the creation of a board led by Trump to oversee governance and reconstruction in Gaza. It also calls for the establishment of an international stabilization force.
Thank you to the council
While the proposal outlines a potential path towards an independent Palestinian state, the language remains weak, offering neither a timeline nor any guarantees. 13 out of 15 members voted in favor of the resolution. Trump applauded the vote, calling it one of the biggest approvals in the history of the United Nations. Hamas, on the other hand, opposed the resolution. The group believes it fails to meet Palestinian people's political and humanitarian demands and that it does not safeguard their rights.
The other factor that we do have to consider is who is actually involved in this Board of Peace. Now, the United Nations actually did approve this as part of the transitional administration for Gaza in 2025, but it's actually gone far beyond the original intention. This Board of Peace, well, it's now got this idea of being an international peacekeeper all around the world, not just Gaza. And I think the use of peacekeeper in this case, it does seem to be ironic. And it's almost setting itself up as a private enterprise alternative to the United Nations. And you can imagine the level of corruption that will go on there, similar to what happened in Iraq. Donald Trump is also the head of this board for as long as he likes, even after his term as president of the United States expires. But the other controversial figure who's involved here is the former Prime Minister of Britain, Tony Blair.
On Tuesday night, I gave the order for British forces to take part in military action in Iraq. Tonight, British servicemen and women are engaged from air, land and sea. Their mission? To remove Saddam Hussein from power and disarm Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction. The threat to Britain today is not that of my father's generation. War between the big powers is unlikely, Europe is at peace, the Cold War already a memory. But this new world faces a new threat of disorder and chaos, born either of brutal states like Iraq, armed with weapons of mass destruction, or of extreme terrorist groups. Both hate our way of life, our freedom, our democracy. My fear, deeply held, based in part on the intelligence that I see, is that these threats come together and deliver catastrophe to our country and our world.
And that was Tony Blair back in 2003, giving his reasons for invading Iraq. And this was also the same message provided by the United States and also by the Australian Prime Minister at the time, John Howard. And the only problem is that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And the invasion of Iraq, which resulted in the deaths of over 600,000 people, was based on a complete lie. And one of the people who was responsible for that is now on this Board of Peace. And one of Tony Blair's first public statements on the Board of Peace was to blame the people of Palestine for all of this destruction in Gaza.
For decades, Gaza's governance has been characterised by extremism, corruption, ineffective institutions, and the complete absence of a route to prosperity for the Gazan people. Yet, as President Trump recognised, its potential has always been vast. 25 miles of Mediterranean coastline, proximity to great regional and global markets, and a young, dynamic population with a median age of 19. So today we set out profound changes necessary to rebuild Gaza for Gazans. Gaza not as it was, but as it should be, including its governance. Effective public institutions serving the people, a business environment where enterprise flourishes, an education system educating the young for tolerance and achievement, and a tech-enabled society making the most of the digital revolution. This is a vision of Gaza as part of a Middle East at peace. Not a phony piece of declarations no one means and agreements no one intends to keep, but a genuine commitment to a region where, whether you're a Muslim, Jew, Christian, of any faith or none, you can rise by your own efforts and feel your government by your side, not on your back. That is the vision behind President Trump's 20-point plan for Gaza, and it remains the best, indeed the only hope for Gaza, the region, and the wider world.
Now, what Tony Blair says there is almost as unbelievable as his statement about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq almost 23 years ago. This Board of Peace is not going to create a tech zone for the Palestinians in Gaza or make it a gateway for business and education. That's the last thing that they want to do, especially after Israel has just spent the last 2 years destroying all of that. And also, Tony Blair didn't explain why the average age of people in Gaza is only 19. He also failed to point out that the biggest donor to the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change is Larry Ellison, and he's one of the biggest Zionist supporters of Israel. He's donated over $375 million US to the Tony Blair Institute. And you can imagine that a massive supporter of Zionism is not going to be too happy with his donation of $375 million if Tony Blair was really going to reconstruct Gaza for the people of Gaza. So that's just not going to happen. So in this case, the guy who should be in jail at The Hague for his war crimes from 2003 and is behaving like the modern-day Henry Kissinger is now responsible for the reconstruction in Gaza, which is pretty much going to ethnically cleanse the remaining Palestinians in the region. Now, this time it won't be with bombs and bulldozers. They'll just forcibly move them onto other parts of the Middle East region, probably Libya or Somaliland. And this is all going ahead until someone stops it. And it's just hard to see who is going to stop this.
Today is a tremendous honor to welcome you all to the United States Institute of Peace for the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace. So I want to thank the many leaders and dignitaries who have traveled great distances and lengths for the important gathering that we're at right now. This meeting today is proof with determined leadership nothing is impossible. We're providing a model for how responsible sovereign nations can cooperate to take responsibility for confronting problems in their own regions. Together we can achieve the dream of bringing lasting harmony to a region tortured by centuries of war. And hopefully we can lift up the eyes of the world to envision how other intractable conflicts can be settled. So I want to thank everybody for being here. You're my friends. You're great leaders.
The other issue is, well, who's getting a seat at the table with this Board of Peace? Donald Trump did issue an invitation to 60 countries to join the Board of Peace, and also with the price tag of $1 billion. And so far, only 20 countries have joined up. Most of them are dictatorships or corrupt regimes, and there's very few democratic countries in that list. Russia has said that they'll consider joining up, but the $1 billion can be taken out of the assets seized by the United States over the war in Ukraine. Some of the countries that have refrained from joining up, such as France or Canada, well, they're being threatened with 200% tariffs on their trade into the United States for not signing up. And this is exactly like some kind of bizarre version of The Godfather, except it's not a very good movie. It's all very bizarre. It's very obscene. And a lot of this is ultra vires as well. It's outside of the law. And international law is currently quite weak. It's always been like that because it's not backed up by any sort of military force. But at least in the past, there's been some pretense about following international law and protocols. And we saw that with the weapons of mass destruction over 20 years ago. At least there was some attempt to cover over all of this sort of stuff and trick everyone. But this time around with this Board of Peace, it's like they just don't care anymore. They're just going to go ahead and do whatever they like. And this Board of Peace is attracting war criminals and criminal dictators, and it's clearly corrupt. And we saw this happening in Iraq. We saw it happening in Afghanistan, in Libya. It's just this continuation of 18th century imperialism and war games. But this time around, it's not a secret anymore. It's all open, and it's going to continue for some time to come.
As I understood it, the government has not yet made a decision about Australia accepting or rejecting the invitation to join Trump's so-called Board of Peace, which has, I think, many have very aptly called it a pay-to-pay club. I'm just wondering when the government will make that decision and make it public.
So, yes, I did respond to Senator Shoebridge on this front, and I think I made a few points, and I should have added, and obviously we're engaging with other partners on this. It would be an international treaty with legally binding obligations, so that's a different arrangement to many arrangements such as the Quad, for example, that we engage in, that we will continue to work with the US obviously AUKUS, Quad, UN, G20. I also made the point to Senator Shoebridge that we remain strong supporters of the UN, notwithstanding the fact I think the UN is facing a difficult period, and the imperative of reform is something I have spoken at length about, that it will have to reform to survive.
And that was a recent exchange between the Australian Greens Senator Mehreen Faruqi and Foreign Minister Penny Wong. And I spent all week trying to work out what Penny Wong actually said there, but still can't work it out. But the upshot is that Australia ended up deciding not to join up with the Board of Peace, and I think it saved itself $1 billion there that Richard Marles can now go and give to the United States as part of the AUKUS deal and get nothing in return that way. But Australia wasn't really going to be a big player in this process anyway, and it's got to the point where nothing that the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says about Palestine is believable anyway. And we can see that the recognition of Palestine was a charade anyway, and even then the decision was only made after a wide range of other countries had moved on that recognition as well. And they would have known it at the time that a recognition of the state of Palestine was pretty much going to be meaningless, even though there were many people around the world who had hoped that it would be something totally different to this. But the only thing that Penny Wong did say in that previous snippet that was correct was that the United Nations is facing a lot of challenges at the moment. Now, it's never been a perfect organisation, and it was probably set up to fail when it was first created in 1945 by the victors of the Second World War, pretty much just like the League of Nations before it as well. So it was far from perfect, or it is far from perfect, but at least it was something to create some kind of world order after the end of the Second World War. But now it just feels like the United Nations is on the verge of collapse, and now we've got this Board of Peace, which is anything but a board of peace. It's more like a lawless criminal who is just going to do whatever they want to do through extortion, beating up on countries, bribes and blackmail. And the Board of Peace is literally headed up by a criminal in Donald Trump. And that's not hyperbole on my behalf. He's actually a criminal, guilty of falsifying business records in the first degree in the United States. He should actually be in jail for trying to overturn the 2020 election result in the US and for inciting violence at the Capitol Hill in January 2021. It's also got someone else on the Board of Peace who should be tried for war crimes, and that's Tony Blair. Another war criminal, Vladimir Putin, he's up for consideration. It's just a matter of sorting out how to pay that $1 billion sign-up fee. And all of the actions by this Board of Peace at this stage are on behalf of yet another war criminal, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. And all of this is also being set up for the state of Israel that's committed a genocide and facing charges at the International Criminal Court. And even though Israel was totally responsible for the destruction of Gaza, it's not paying 1 cent towards its reconstruction. It's getting everyone else to pay for its crimes. So this is what all of this is. This is what the Board of Peace is. It should be called the Board of Genocide or the Board of War Criminals, the Board of Ethnic Cleansing. It should be called anything else except for the Board of Peace, because it's got nothing to do with promoting peace. All it's doing is confirming and approving the genocide committed by Israel. It's also paying for the destruction of Gaza that was caused by Israel. And this looks like it's going to be the new rule book in international politics for the foreseeable future, that the so-called peace is going to be based around destruction without any form of accountability. There's going to be reconstruction without involving the people who actually live in the place that's been destroyed. And ultimately, I don't think we're going to see the end of conflict, either in Gaza or any other part of the world under this sort of process. But all it's doing is setting up the next round of conflicts at some point in the future. And that's what this Board of Peace is all about, the endless wars that just keep going on and on and on and on. And it's all for the Western powers that just keep getting all the benefit out of this. That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you'd like to support our style of journalism and commentary, please make a donation at our website at newpolitics.com.au. We don't beg, plead, beseech or gaslight you about journalism coming to an end. We just keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.